Welcome to In This Body, the online event to support parents, caregivers, and family members with staying regulated and connected even when things get intense. And today I have a wonderful speaker with me, Remmy Stourac. Remy is a river crossing, mountain climbing, horseback guiding, story crafting, cancer surviving man of faith and action. He is dedicated to magnifying a world of gratitude and wholeheartedness in humanity at every turn. In honor of his upbringing with Kids Cancer Care Foundation of Alberta, 10% of all his books proceeds are donated in hopes to pass on the opportunity to the next generation of young survivors. It's so good to have you here, Remy.
Such an honor to be had. I can't wait to share and yeah, be involved in your community and serve to the greatest capacity that I can.
Yeah. Your bio always intrigues me every time I read it, and I don't know where to start. So I'm just gonna ask you like where does your story begin?
Yeah, my intro has to span that whole like almost 25 years of my life now. And I get to say it kind of really began at 4 years old. And I get to say that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me because even though I had three heart procedures and 3.5 years of treatment, I got to grow up along other survivors, and my best friends were double brain tumor survivors, amputees, half blind. And these were some of the most courageous, present people I had ever met. And I was like, what's the difference between these kids who have like a really genuine reason to complain and be like, oh, like this is too difficult? But they're like, no, I'm just lucky to be here. I want to see like what's the limit for me. I don't want my diagnosis to belittle my life. And that seems to be such a normalcy in this world now where people are just be like, oh, I have a good excuse. But I saw like what is like the threshold that people get so frustrated with their diagnosis. They're like, no, I'm going to see what my life is fully capable of. And I got to grow up with this normalcy that health is such a precious gift from the baseline. And as many miracles that I got to see growing up in this community. We got to go to this kids cancer care camp Kindle in Alberta, Canada. And it was 5 days for kids aged 7 to 17 to be able to like live at this camp and be surrounded by other survivors and siblings and just totally rip the band-aids off and the bubbles that doctors put on our lives, like, oh, don't scrape your knee because uh, your immunity is low. But we're just surrounded by nurses and have like all the safety nets to completely unravel and be curious again and just put the play button back on life rather than just like being so mature as little kids taking care of our life, right? But with all the beauty that came with it, there was certainly, some tragedies that came along. And that place exists solely because one woman lost her son at 13 years old to cancer. And her dedication to herself, how she transformed that grief was says, I'm going to make sure no other family suffers like I will. And so she created this nonprofit so other families could get together and collaborate and just like not be alone in this like very difficult terrain to navigate emotionally, financially, all these different aspects. And then just a space for kids to go play again. And so a big emphasis of what I want to talk about is what breaks your heart the most about the world is where you're called to serve. And so the kind of equivalent of what it was for that woman, and I've become such a benefactor of her heartbreak, to say in such a strange way, that I recognize the sorrow that she went through. And when I was 12 years old, because I had leukemia, and we were so little kids that we like at the end of the camp week, it's like, I'm going to get your mom's number so we can find each other again and see you again next summer. All of our friends are together again at about age 11 or 12. And everybody's there except one friend named Davis. And he had the same cancer that I had. And so Davis's little sister, who's 9 years old, has to come up to us and say, Davis's cancer came back and he didn't make it this time. And so us as 11 and 12-year-old kids have about 10 minutes together where we're navigating survivor's guilt together of like, what's the difference between him and me? There's absolutely nothing. And it didn't take us long at all to realize that Like, if Davis doesn't get to be here, we have to live twice as courageously to make up for the fact that he's not here, because our life could be taken at any time. And that's pretty hardcore for little kids to have to navigate. But that just became so embedded in our character and how we navigate life. And I feel like I'm in constant communication with, that 11-year-old boy who doesn't get to be here. And anytime I'm afraid of something, it's like, it's what a blessing it is to be afraid of something that excites me. What a world that, my time could have been tapped out 20 years ago, and that could have been the limit. And so I still have a register where, you know, he maxed out at this young age where now I'm at the point where I'm balding and you have all these funny little things. It's like, I didn't ever think I was going to make it this far. And all the blessings that I have strung along because I sat in my fear, and all these times that I got to redefine myself, because the sharpest definition of who we are is where we stop and what things I can't do that. I'm afraid, because otherwise we are unlimited potential. And as long as we slowly, continuously knock down things that we thought were impossible or not for us, we don this perspective of like, what is actually not possible, because it's almost like it continues. So I keep knocking on doors, things will eventually happen. And the difference of like, if you reject yourself first, there's 100% chance something will not work out. But if you at least ask or try for something that you may not even be qualified for, there's still a 1% chance where somebody's like, you know what, I really respect your curiosity. Yeah, let me show you. And you're like, oh God, I didn't expect that to work out. And then you get to come home with a funny story at very least. But to take that childlike curiosity into adulthood and be like, oh, what a gift it is. That it's like, yeah, when we're entering the world, it's the default. Yeah, I'm going to suck at everything that I try. But then when we become adults, it's like, oh, I don't want to, embarrass myself. It's like, that's just the entry fee to being interested in your own life. Otherwise you default to monotony and like all these ways that we get like quick dopamine that makes us a just a viewer to our own life rather than an active participant in it. And my friend who just adopted this rescue cat kind of created the perfect analogy for this, because this scared, beautiful little animal came into his basement suite and found a safe space under his bed, and like only comes out for food and just like totally trickles out. But day by day, the expansion of this little animal's comfort zone slowly expands. But as it gets stressed out, like puts its head around the corner and then goes back again. It's like, oh, that was enough for today. It's like, man, we're the exact same. Absolutely, but it's also honoring ourselves to retreat and be like, okay, that was enough tension for today. But day by day by day, it took a month or so, but now this cat is going out the door and it's prowling around the streets and it's like captivated by life again. And there was like a small amount of depression, but only caged animals are depressed. There is no animals in nature that are depressed. They don't pity themselves. They just go out there and they live, and they are like one with existence. It's only when they're in captivity that they start to like pull out their own fur and create all these elements that are self-defeating. But when they're in their natural element, slowly expanding, they are full of life and they become so healthy. And that's a natural aspect of it. But with the grand scope of how that, like, if the adventure calls, we must answer that promise. I knew I always wanted to be a full-time counselor with this kids' cancer care camp. And so I was there every single year from 7 to 16, and then 17, 18, I dedicated my entire summers. I'm like, I don't care if I have to labor 10 months a year so I can come back and volunteer and be meaningfully involved in these kids' lives, because I have seen every stage of being the little kid who's homesick and being the kid who's going through puberty and liking girls for the first time and getting his heart broke, and all these tiny little aspects of like the natural adventure of maturity for these kids, and getting to see all these ages of development just crack the shell of what they thought was possible, and the momentum of communal courage that happens through these kids. It's such an honor to just be the facilitator of safety for these kids to go maximize themselves, because it's their default mode. As soon as they're like, I'm healthy, I want to go play. what am I capable of? Like, what's the limit? And yeah, they go scrape their knees and they get a little hurt, but that's just a part of the game, you know? Um, but in the spirit of saying yes to the adventure, when I was 19, my two older brothers offered for us to be the first horseback guides to bring horses back into the Northwest Territories, very close to the Arctic Circle of Canada. 40 years ago, four guys and 18 horses tried to do this, where we drive to where the road ends in the Yukon and we trail ride 500 kilometers or 300 miles over 14 days just to get where the Northwest Territories begins. And so we're just like riding through the marsh. It's as cowboy as it can humanly get. But 40 years ago, these four guys and 18 horses managed to do most of a 4 month season, but on their way out, they got stuck in a 7 day blizzard and two guys froze to death and they had to leave their 18 horses out there and they all died. And the two guys remaining got medevaced out. And my brothers are like, do you want to make it a family thing? And I'm like, what? I mean, yeah. I made a promise to myself that I have to say yes. And I'm like, when would an opportunity like this ever happen again? And this season overlapped my opportunity in the summer to be at Kids Cancer Care. And so it initially broke my heart to suddenly, I was having this exotic experience, but I was, getting my butt kicked by horses and, just all beaten by the elements. But I'm like, I'm not being meaningfully involved in people's lives to the same depth as I am just having this exotic, crazy adventure where we would go hunt moose, caribou, and Dall sheep. And we would feed the meat to the native villages of the Northwest Territories. So there was still like a philanthropic element to it. And it was incredible to just between me and my two brothers donate thousands and thousands of pounds of meat to ethically harvest these animals and still like give it to tribes who like maximize every single fiber of these animals. But there was still an element of me that was like I am meant to serve. But I was still like, I would not be brought to this moment if it's not going to bring something incredible out of me. So I just was like trying to have this communication with like, if I'm going to be here away from what I believe to be my optimal purpose, like, what am I supposed to learn? And I just began to, this seemed to be where I really nurtured my faith because it felt like me and God versus the wilderness. Because I would wake up from my tent every morning for 4 months, grab my shotgun, and follow horse tracks into the wilderness to go find them. We would let them loose every single night. And there's no fences up there. It's as wild as the world still gets. And as far as they went, I would just have to follow them through rivers. And like I bumped into grizzlies and got swept down glacier rivers just finding my horses all before breakfast. And this crazy adventure. And I was just like, I didn't come here to die. There would be times where I was bumping into grizzlies and I just had this totally new composure. I'm like, that's not where my story ends. I didn't survive cancer to die in the wilderness. I'm just a man, but that's not where my story ends. And I took on an entirely different composure of life. And all these things that could have brought a lot of anxiety, where I know I was being stalked by animals while I was looking for my horses, I was like, I didn't come here to die. And I did not take on any anxiety because I'm like, any moment that arrives to me is meant for me. And I had this like, wow, I've never been so present and like in tune with my faith, and feel like maximized, even though I'm not where I wanted to be in maximal service to kids' cancer care. I'm like, I am becoming and like really refining my edge as a man, just being one with the wilderness in like most old school kind of way that's possible. But when I returned to real life after 4 months of being in the wilderness, no Wi-Fi, no nothing, like truly immersed, I had my first panic attack just because my senses were not used to having like two conversations and music in the background because every stimulus was really important. And so I heard every like little stick crack behind me, every horse snort. Oh, is that a horse or is that like a caribou? Like every tiny little element, we were so dialed in. And even being back in a vehicle, going from 1 horsepower to being in a vehicle, I was death gripping the steering wheel. And I was like, oh, just entirely nervous system attuned to a different reality. And I had to readjust to that. And even I was kind of hardcore. I was like, oh, if you're having a panic attack, like you're just being a baby. But I was like, your nervous system just simply isn't attuned to what's going on. And so I got really humbled in that aspect, reintegrating myself into the world. But I had all these exotic stories, and it was like, oh, big mountain man. But then I was afraid to go talk to the girl, or I was afraid to initiate a conversation. And there's all these little things. Oh, I was afraid to go dance. And I was like, all these people are holding me to such high esteem because of this crazy adventure. But I was having a bit of a character crisis of sorts because it'd be like, oh, courageous man. But I'm like, all I feel is fear, all these situations that I'm denying myself. And so it feels like I'm maxed out in the adventure, like badass backwoodsy guy. But when it comes to like relational capacity, emotional intelligence, there was all these things that I was like, oh, people are holding me to a high regard. But I'm like, I feel really small over here. And it just created a separation of my identity that I'm like, I really need to like be courageous in all these other things and not just like lean on like an egotistical version of me that feels like really safe and easy, you know? Because all it made me want to do is like, I just want to go back into the wilderness so I can't get rejected or make a fool of myself. And it's like I had lost that playful curiosity and I was kind of falling into the egotistical, oh, what a badass adventure, man. You know? Um, but to, yeah, really fast forward this story of, I went back for a second season guiding and I was like, again, kind of heartbroken that I was missing kids' cancer care. But I'm like, I would not be brought here if it wasn't supposed to serve me in some way. And so I was waiting. I was like, okay, when's my next lesson, God? And don't ask that unless you want a significant crisis of some sort. um, because how this manifested without it being the very long-winded story is that there was a time where me and my brothers split up and we promised to never split up because there's no promising if we decide to wrap around a valley 10 minutes just to get a different view that I don't bump into a grizzly and my horse backflips. Something awful could happen. But we got far too comfortable, of course. And my brother's like, okay, I'm going to take half the string of horses and I'm going to take this hunter down the valley. I'll be back in 3 days, I promise. And that meant I got a break for the first time in 67 days. And I'm like, see you later, buddy. Like, have a wonderful time. I'll just hold down the fort. I'll have some caribou steaks and take care of these horses and see you later. And so he takes the satellite phone and so I have nothing but my six horses and just time to read and chill out and just enjoy myself finally after more than 2 months of just go, go, go. And day three comes around and he said, I promise I'll be back the night of day three. And I'm having caribou steaks around this fire. And this grizzly pops out from 100 yards away across this little river in front of me. And it wanders right up to the other side of the river. And it can clearly smell my food. And I don't go anywhere. We don't go to the bathroom without our guns. It's just, there's always something somewhere. And so this bear gets up on its back legs and it's smelling. And I have my gun in my hand and I'm like, I never want to hurt anything that I don't have to. 95% of bears, like if you can see that they have a full belly, they don't want to do anything that's like, they've never met me. I'm an alien, everything. And so it gets on its back legs, but I have my gun and I like pop a shell in the chamber and I'm like, do something, like seeing like where its energy's at. And it looks all around my head and my six horses are looking at it. It doesn't even look at me once. Well, I'm like, do something. And it just gets back on four legs and walks off. And I'm like, it didn't even look at me. And I'm screaming at this thing just to like see. And so I'm like, it's so utterly unconcerned that it made it way more scary for me. He's like, nah, small peanuts. I'm like, oh my God, you know? And I'm like, okay, I just have to get through today. And then my brother will be back tomorrow. But I know it's interested in my food now. And so I had to set up the whole camp with pack boxes and add extra sticks on the ground. So if I hear something snapping in the night, I know what's happening. And with the routine of letting our horses go every night, they have bells on their neck. So at least if they're close, then I can kind of hear them. But all I hear is ding, ding, ding into the dark. And I'm like, I'm really alone now. And so I'm like, okay, I just have to get through tonight. Everything's going to be fine. And I like fall asleep with my headlamp on my head. It's 2 a.m., pitch dark, and like holding my shotgun against my chest. And I remember waking up and I hear wolves howling and yapping around me. And I'm like, nope, waiting for a bear. But it was so loud that it was screeching in my ear. And I'm like, whoa, like they're circling me. And so I roll out of my tent, turn on my headlamp, and I see three sets of eyes to my left, two to my right, and more behind me. I'm like, I only have 4 bullets on me. And so instinctively, bullet in the chamber, just screamed, fire a shot in the air, and I just see eyes disperse into the darkness. And I had everything set up to like make this bonfire really quickly, and I'm just like frantically looking around in the dark, is like just for anything, and I like just looking for eyes, and I'm hugging this fire until like daylight, and I end up following these wolf tracks on top of my horse tracks. And by the time I found my horses that morning, they were all like really angry, like almost kicking at me, like they were harassed. I was like, I'm frustrated too. Ben's going to be back today. Everything's going to be fine. And so I'm in this like maximally frustrated, like looking at all these like prints in the ground. I was like, death was literally circling me. If these wolves were hungry enough, like it would have been, that would have been it. And I'm like, I can't wait to show my brother. Like, like you'd never imagine that this could happen. And the horses were like really still just kind of staying there, tied up against the trees. But like I follow the energies of the animals. And if they're anxious, I'm like, I'm anxious too. And that whole day goes by and my brother does not come home. And I'm like, all I had in the world was his promise. And so, of course, my head starts to go worst case scenario now. Is he hurt? Is he wounded? Is the hunter hurt? Like, what could go wrong? And my brother decides to not come back for day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 5 days that I'm wondering, is he hurt or dead? Why did he go back on his promise? Because there's no way for me to pick up the whole camp with my few horses and find him 8 hours down the valley where he went. And there's just no way about it that if I went by myself, it would have been 16 hours there and back just to check all these things. So I'm like, I am stuck here. And I had like a shake my fist at the sky moment, like, what is this for, God? What could justify this stress? And I realized I carried a Game of Thrones book, 500 kilometers by horseback, just to have something to relax to. I was like, what if I wrote a book and gave 10% to kids' cancer care? So if I die young, at least I could give some sort of legacy. And writing those ideas to what became my first fantasy book ended up just keeping my head straight. And I was like, okay, I can still live a purposeful life. And when I get out of here, I can do something. And this is just a crazy story, you know? And all behold, day 7, my brother comes back and he has this like world record book caribou. It was this magnificent thing. And he's all smiles and swagger. I was like, this was not fun. I do not like any bit of this. I did not have fun. But then the domino effect of this thing being like, okay, then I went and it's like, I can use every single fiber of my downtime to nurture my creativity, and I could be the next Game of Thrones, Dragons guy, whatever, the fantasy of, oh, it's a lot easier or it's a lot harder than you think. But I ended up creating this book, and then I realized I was in the entertainment world, not the philanthropy world, because anytime people were getting excited about the fantasy book, I wanted to talk about kids' cancer care, the why behind I'm doing it, and returning back to like what breaks your heart what breaks your heart most in the world is where you're called to serve. And so I'm like, this was just like a sideways way that's fun for me, but it wasn't quite as aligned as it could be. And because of that, I'm like, I got to nurture my creativity and throw myself at like what's possible. It's like there's really nobody stopping you from creating something and just distributing a story to the whole world. And so I was like, I did want to write about my friends and their spirit of gratitude and resilience despite all odds. And 2 years after that, I just threw my whole being to like, what is the absolute limit of gratitude? How do I manifest that relationally, financially, physically, and just like be the walking embodiment of I'm just lucky to be here. So I could just exude off of me. And in the experiment of becoming that and waging war on mediocrity and regret, because the thing that I despise the most, and it's like the call of an arsenal of gratitude, is you don't know what you have until it's gone, dies with this book. Because to have something so incredible right in front of you and then meet the aftermath of that and says, oh, I could have been more present. I could have been, a little bit more loving. It's like, how is that such a common experience that we fumble the beauty right in front of us? And I'm like, became extra grateful for the sorrows and the tragedies of my childhood because we were right there and we were so in tune with one another. And even as an adult, people are like, oh, gratitude's a little bit woo woo. It's like, yeah, just wait until you have a tragedy that forces you to see all the things you wish you noticed in the first time. And so somehow we meet this with like a woo woo, oh, it's not that important. I must be grateful enough. It's really offensive, actually, for people to admit that they're not being grateful enough. Because by default, you have to say, like, oh, I'm actually not showing up very well. And it demands quite a bit of you. And so, of course, we all think we're grateful enough. It's like, oh, it's why we have it. I worked for it. Um, but if I'm grateful for my car, I wash it all the time and I keep the seats clean, all these little details. It's like, okay, what's the same of the relationship? Am I emotionally in tune? Am I healthy so we can have the most adventures? And all these facets that become like, am I truly living holistically magnificent so people can get all of me while I'm here and not be self-defeating enough? Because not until it's gone that I realized, oh, there was so much more in me. And to have that crisis prevention spirit, that it's like I was fully present so I can celebrate in grief and not just realize all of my inadequacies. And that just seems to be such a blanket of sorrow in the world that we only notice after the fact. But in the aftermath, the last thing I'll say before we can open up this conversation, the natural progression of finishing that gratitude book and what became next is like, okay, I'm really grateful and tuned in, but what am I not grateful for? What actually kind of really still pisses me off, because gratitude just kind of makes you seem like, oh, like everything you have right now is enough. But it's like, if I'm healthy enough, I can go adventure. If I have enough finances to be above water and make choices, like all these things that make you incredibly abundant with as little as possible. And so there's very little things weighing you down and you can just launch yourself at the world. The natural progression of what I'm not grateful for, of those like, oh, I'm not grateful for the way that this person treats me, or that I'm in a job where I don't feel properly compensated. And it's like, okay, what do I have to tap into to rearrange myself where I can actually be grateful for this? Because it's all the things that I'm not grateful for that propel me forward in life. Because I'm like, okay, I'm abundant with very little, but I'm not meant to live with very little. If I want to be a servant to the world, I can't do that from my minimalist box. Like, I'm meant to maximize my abundance and pay that forward, and I can be of greater service. And I had to tap into all the ways that I was selling myself short in almost a toxic gratitude fashion. It's like, oh, you should be grateful for this. It's like, no, where you're not grateful is exactly where you have to grow. And to lean into all of those ways that, yeah, I am scared of this conversation, but to recalibrate all fear to curiosity and an opportunity for intimacy if it involves people. That it's like, no, this isn't an opportunity for us to break because it's a little bit of friction. It's to actually see like how much we really are on the same team here. And just to integrate that element of play into the big, scary world of all the things that make us small, but to come back to that cat that is slowly expanding itself in the world. It's like, okay, that's what we're doing in the work world, in our relationships, in our community, talking to people now, all these safety nets that we have. We're just this wounded little animal that is trying to expand its sense of connection and love and capacity and adventure in the world. We're just all the walking wounded, but we seem to put each other on pedestals. It's like, oh, it must be nice if you had this, and weigh our blessings and downfalls aside each other. But it's like, no, we're all in the trenches doing the absolute best we can, and just fumbling forward valiantly, because our attempt to just mess it up with a good attitude gives everybody else permission to tap into that inner kid who just wants to explore and do the scary thing and celebrate it, and not get so serious about, oh, I failed this, therefore this is like the definition of my character, and that's the reason why I'm going to stay small and not do anything scary in this life. It's like, no, we're going to keep playing until the end of our days, and to show up like maximally used up and say, I didn't miss a single thing. The last thing I'll say, I haven't missed a gratitude journal day in 9 years now, and I'm about 17,000 notes deep. And to have something that I can just open up these books and double dip on any single moment. And if somebody's having a bad day, it's like, oh, just give me a second. Let me just crack you open to note 15,462. You actually made my day. You showed up with a coffee when I was like really sad. And it's like, you show up. You're an incredible person. Like you're attuned to people's needs. You show up. And it just became a like an arsenal of reasons that of how to express other people's magnificence too. And it's like, it's not just like a feely thing. I'm like, I have evidence that you're incredible. Like I don't miss a freaking beat of the beauty in the people and the opportunities and the way that I even thank myself. It's like I put out 300 plus videos on Instagram, but it ended up being like number 316 that actually popped off and created all these connections that totally changed my life at 27. It's like it's just that 1% chance of doing it over and over and over and over and over again. As long as I was not rejecting myself, I was playing with the world, and that kept me alive. But it wasn't for me. It was to be of maximal service, because the best of me, meaning the best of other people, continuously lives out that spirit of kids' cancer care, that my grief can pay it forward. And I can translate everything that ever broke my heart into the betterment of other people. And that is how I feel the best way that we can do greatest service to our grief and fear and amplify connection and goodness in the world.
Mm, mm. Uh, what a wonderful story.
Thank you,
Uh,
Nadine.
yeah, thank you for sharing all that. I didn't know all parts of it. I knew some of it before, but the way you tied in everything together, uh, eh, I want to start where you ended, right where you ended, where being of service to others and paying it forward, that's one of the excellent ways that we can move through the fear. Like the fear
Absolutely.
remains, but we can move through the fear. And I relate to that so much because in my journey at what becoming a mom and being in service to my family and my kids
Mm,
was the thing that actually made me get over a lot of my fears. And because you're being of service, you're giving your love to others.
that's right.
It's so motivating.
Yeah. And on that note, I like to say we are in the constant crossfire of who we are to one another. And having kids is the most evident version of that, because they're just sponges to you. And if something like frustrating comes out of them, they're like, that's me. That's my fault. But to do that in all life, it's like, oh, if I'm in a sad mood and my body posture and everything's like, don't engage me. Or if there's some posture, if I'm just like bobbing my head, I don't even need music in my headphones, but people can see like, oh, that person's kind of excited for life. How interesting. And there's just something so magnetic about moving through this world that we can complement one another that way. And so there's no passivity in this life at all. And so when you can even play as a participant in that tiny little energetic way, just smiling and nodding and making people feel safe, people are like, oh, that person seems really happy. Good for them, you know? It's just, it can't help but be felt.
Yes, it triples out. It triples out so quickly.
Mm,
Yes.
yeah,
And that curiosity, bringing in that curiosity and just that excitement to be curious and to really live in awe. My question, what would you do when you become over serious, when you take life too seriously, when your problems sort of pile up and
mhm.
it, and you find yourself like in that position where people are hurt around you, or when you're
Yeah.
hurting, you're feeling the pain.
My first reframe that I'm so glad has like rippled out in my friend group and people that have found my gratitude book is the difference between good problems and bad problems, where a bad problem would be something out of neglect, where it's like I feel baseline stress all the time because there's a conversation that like needs to be had, but I'm just kind of avoiding and procrastinating. But a good problem would be like, oh, I have the opportunity to choose between two different jobs right now. Or the time that this came up and was like embedded in me was when I was confiding in a friend who was like, my car's about to blow up. Do I spend $5,000 to buy a new vehicle? Or do I do that and publish my gratitude book because it was self published and do this package? It's like your stress is really weird because you're literally choosing between buying a new Freedom Wagon, even if it's like kind of bare bones, or like doing your life's calling. Like that is such a beautiful problem to be had. Like you're going to be fine either way. I was like, whoa, thank you. I don't act like at that time that told me, I was like, I'm not hungry. I'm not thirsty. I'm not starving. I'm not freezing. And it just reestablished like I'm actually like really okay right now. And good problems are like a re-emphasis of like, oh, these are like I have a choice. I have power to like decide how my life is moving. But those, yeah, bad problems or dumb problems, it's like I'm actually just avoiding the inevitable and haven't reframed like those scary conversations of friction to be like, oh, this is an opportunity for intimacy, or here's an opportunity for me to refine how I communicate. It's just like it's gathering evidence of just how to show up in the world rather than to say, oh, this was a win or a loss. Like it's all just an experiment. And to take off the seriousness that one failure or one bad conversation is defining. It's like, no, we are the definition of this entire relationship. This is one little blip. Okay, I'm prepared to sit in something that sucks with you for a few minutes or an hour so we can celebrate each other on the other end. Like you are worth the difficult conversation. And there's so many ways to refirm. And like it's not a you versus me, it's an us versus problem. There's so many ways to make it intimacy and yeah, reframe problems into opportunities. Because it's like this is what is handed to your world right now. Anything could be happening, but this is what's in front of you. And to give it your utmost attention, um, yeah, it just entirely recalibrates problems to intimacy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that approach. Uh, and you mentioned fear a bit here, being scared of facing, or okay, we avoid, we distract,
Mm-hmm.
we deny it's there because we're afraid. So that fear, and I remember while you were sharing your story, you talked about fear as where we are at the edge. It's at
Mm-hmm.
the edge of who we are.
Yeah.
Uh, Can you speak more to that?
Yeah. There is an optimal place that we refine our capacity because if we play a game, like I couldn't go play football against a bunch of like middle school kids. That's not a real game. That's not honing my capacity or anything. But like, yeah, I'm in a volleyball community, and there's a massive difference between being invited to like a high end, like very intense super league or just having a fun rec beach time. And just the energy of everybody else around you like really calls the best out of you, and you will tap into another entire gear of your capacity and intensity because it's the environment that's been made. But as far as like the definition, the sharpest definition of who you are is where you quit. It's again kind of going back to that cat. It's like, don't throw yourself into the deep end if you're not a very good swimmer, but just like learn to wade and build those muscles and like honor yourself to come back. But you will notice in your exhaustion that your internal monologue will say, I showed up for today. It was difficult and it was kind of scary, but wow, like I actually showed up and my capacity was used. But if you're just exhausted because you haven't been used up, you have like almost a brewing intensity in your body because you had like 5 cups of coffee, but then actually didn't do anything physical. There's a total misalignment in your body. And there's like such an unspoken language non-verbally happening through your emotions all of the time that will tell you exactly your contentment. And there's that perfect measure of, if you're afraid of dancing and just like kind of being on the edge and having like a little boogie and slowly kind of like making your way in and just taking up space, that it could be such a small gesture, but you're like, I still showed up. I told myself I was afraid of dancing, but in that capacity, that was me as the little cat, slowly honoring that. Um, and yeah, just to like, how can I say yes to myself in the absolute smallest fashion? That could be the definition that fear didn't win today. You know?
Mm,
Yeah,
yes.
because it's fear kind of has to be like, oh, it could be monumental. It's like, no, if it's that small way that you honor yourself, recalibrates that identity to say, like, I show up for myself. I can trust myself in greater and greater capacities. That's like the bare bones version of it.
Hmm. And unless you go for it and show up, you'd never know whether it is for you or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Another small story that's like a serendipity of trying that I had denied myself an opportunity, not an opportunity, but just plainly rejected myself. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot one day, but I just Googled, hey, can you be a pilot if you've had heart procedures? And Google said no. I was like, okay, that makes sense. You don't want the guy in the air flying your helicopter with a fluttery heart. Makes sense. But I made a huge list of all the ways that I had rejected myself. I was like, how many ways have I simply said no to myself instead of letting the world say no to me? And that was like on one of the top of the list. And I was like, okay, if I'm honoring myself, I'm going to go get a medical evaluation and just make sure that that doctor, it's his job to say no to me and do all the ECG and everything so I can have that peace of mind that I didn't reject myself. And I end up doing this test, flying colors. And I told him, I was like, if I'm malnourished, like I can get heart palpitations. I have a really good rap on it. I'm like, you're the guy who's supposed to say no to me. He's like, you're a young, healthy guy. You're really taking care of yourself. You pass with flying colors. It's crazy if you don't go for it. I'm like, okay, I spent the last 10 years of my life saying no to me, and you're the guy who says go full speed ahead. Okay. And so I'm like, that was one little conversation I had with myself. And I knew one helicopter pilot because of guiding a decade ago. And I knew this guy for 10 minutes because he just dropped off a hunter for us and flew away. And I called this guy up. I said, hey, Matt, it's Remy. You dropped off a hunter for us. You remember? I'm curious about a helicopter pilot career. Could I just have a couple minutes and like ask you about it? 10-minute conversation later, he's like, why don't you drive to the Yukon, 37 hours away, hang out and like work at my helicopter pad for the summer and see if you like it before you spend $80,000 for schooling? Yes. Okay. Follow the trail. And so within a month, I sold all my stuff, drove up there for the summer, had this beautiful, beautiful experience and got to expand the north from this little helicopter pad in the middle of nowhere, 150 kilometers from any other little village, just 500 Inuit people in this little town. And we got to help the firefighters and the geologists and the miners. And I just got like a full immersion into an entirely different world because I slowly followed this trickle of, was I the one in my own way? And all these things that happened because of it. But the beautiful thing that brought me back to what's literally in your back is follow your soul's calling was that in this little town, the native village was really affected by the residential schools. And so it's when the government like really devastated the native population through like taking kids from the families and put them in schools and abuse them. It's this really dark history of Canada. But the kids, we were putting like 12 to 16-year-old kids on these helicopters at noon, and they were absolutely wasted drunk. And we were bringing them to like these native um, kind of places to sober up and just kind of like detox from the somehow the ways that these families were just riddled with addiction. And I knew in my soul, I'm like, I want to be the guy who's over there teaching these kids how to live a wholehearted life, not just being the badass transportation guy. And so when this whole summer of absolute serendipitous beauty, I still was able to come back. I was like, that's my gift. I need to return to that. And so I was able to say, like, Matt, thank you so much for this. Thank you for saving me $80,000 from just a small conversation. And I like got out of my own way in every fiber of my being and was so utterly blessed with this adventure because of it. But it still brought me back to this.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That that following your the nudges and
Mm-hmm.
what you're just called to do and just trying it out. It takes courage, really going on adventures. It
It
takes
does.
courage, especially in this world that we live in today, where um, it's a risk proof. We want to
Mhm.
just we don't want to take the risk. We want everything certain right
Yeah.
before everything else. Yeah. Now your story is very inspiring.
That word you use specifically, we want certainty
Mm,
to feel fulfilled in life. There is a baseline uncertainty that we do need. Because
mm,
if we woke up every single day and it says, I'm going to have the food that I want, I'm going to wake up to the person that I love, there's all these positive things. But for life to actually be stimulating and involving, we need uncertainty. And when I realized, I was like, oh, I actually need something to stress myself out against. Otherwise, all my edges soften and I get ungrateful. I lose my composure. I lose my physical health because nothing's challenging me. Challenging is the healthiest way to actually continuously hone my health, my mental, my well being, my spirituality. Because if everything becomes so safe, we become that caged animal. It's like, our, it's the only time in all of history that we've been able to be safe. And it is I'm going to call it the dumbest problem that we can positively have is that we have become weak because of our overabundance. And that's a total failure of our gratitude. It's like if I'm lucky enough to be safe, I need to play with my mental and my adventure and my curiosity and my creativity because previous generations have prayed for just a time to breathe and not be stressing out. And now we're just bored, you know? Oh,
mm,
how lucky we are to be bored. It means we're safe, we're healthy, we're fine, we're warm, you know?
mhm. And that's something I tell my kids, like they're teens, and they wake up and it's almost summer holidays, and oh, I'm bored, I'm bored,
Yeah.
and it's having that mindset and also that agency
Mm,
to go and chase for adventures instead of sitting and waiting for
that's
adventure
right.
to come to our lap. I
That's
think
right.
that agency is also something we kind of we don't have a lot in society today. Um, yeah. Eh, As you were talking, I was reminded by something you said at the start around
Mm,
when you were talking about the cancer camp and providing that communal courage
yeah.
to the kids. So, can you speak more about what does it mean? What does communal courage mean?
Mm. Even in the smallest, on a personal, before that, let's say the helicopter experience, if I was able to follow that entire serendipity just to, have that story for myself and said, I got out of my own way in this one way, look what happened. I still have a residual like, wow, there's a lot of magnificence hiding behind these tiny little things in our way. But on the communal front, to witness like there's a giant swing where you get put in a harness and you can get pulled anywhere from 10 to 40 feet up in the air. And when you get to the 40 feet, it actually free fall drops you for 10 feet and swings you over this gorge at about 80 feet. So I think it's one of the biggest swings in Western Canada, which is so cool to have at a nonprofit camp. But I was one of those kids who was deathly afraid of heights. And for me to even like get up and be strapped in and just be hanging there was like a huge deal to me. And then my other friends would be like, I'm going to the top. And I'm like, whoa, what's the difference there? There's no difference. Like, how is their composure different? Of course, little kids aren't like saying that, but they're like so curious. It's like, well, why can't I? But they get to witness courage on all these different fronts. And so let's say if I proclaim myself as a bad artist, but then I sit beside the kid who's fantastic and I'm just curious, there's just a vicarious overflow on all of these different elements that it's like, well, I didn't think that I could be good at this. I literally just wrote myself off. Oh, I'm a country kid. I'm not good at art. But I'm like, wow, I really like this. And this, like, I got to watch a 9-year-old girl, is one of my favorite stories, who was deathly afraid of heights. And you have to walk up 5 steps just to get harnessed in. And she got up to like step 3 and she just like broke out in tears. She said, can't do it, can't do it. We're like, you tried. Like, that's still a significant win. And my co-counselor was able to like take her aside and talk her down for 15 minutes. And I was like helping shuffle the other like 9, 10-year-old kids through this experience. And this girl comes back 15 minutes later and she tapped into something and she said, my brother would be proud of me if I tried. And she lost her older brother last year to cancer. And something just totally changed in her entire being. And she says, this isn't about me. This is about me living for my family. She did not only get strapped in, she got to the top and she screamed her little heart out to get across. But the exuberance of her being for this 9-year-old girl to get off of the swing and says, my family is going to be so proud of me. To just like, I just get chills every time I get to bring that story up again because I just get to relive in that vicarious courage of like, look at the capacity of a 9-year-old girl, and the things that stop us as adults, man, that's just a rhythm that we got into. But we can crack that in tiny little bits and we can expand and we can feel that full exuberance. But being that in ourselves is how we help make that a normalcy for others.
Yeah, yeah. It's showing up as role models, which that's the best that we can do
Mhm.
in front of the young people. Yeah,
Yeah.
our
But
kids.
to have, yeah, the fact
Yeah.
that us as counselors, we think we're the role models, but to then see them, the courageous ones, like these little kids are the role models for one
Mm.
another. Like they don't need to see adults being courageous. That seems so distant. But when they among each other are doing that, yeah,
Mhm.
just, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Uh, yeah. Um, Anything else we didn't touch on with dealing with fear? And oh, yeah, I remembered. So I
Mm,
remembered one thing while you were telling your story, while you were in the wilderness, and how
yeah.
you kept coming to that single thing, that single sentence, that you're not meant to die today. And
Yeah.
that trust, I guess, that faith,
Mhm.
that's really powerful. Mm.
And I felt when I came home that I had lost my faith because when I was walking through a mall and I wanted to say hi to somebody, it's not that I couldn't, but is that I simply wasn't tapping into, I didn't come here to die, where it's like I could do something of magnitude, but then something so small and harmless felt big. But like, I just had to like recalibrate where it's like, I didn't come here to die. It's like I came to live here courageously. I came to do this scary thing. This isn't the end of me. But then instead of missing that like 30-second opportunity for a conversation, it haunted me for like a week, and the residual of that is just like huge, right? And I had came to this conclusion that thankfully I had a mentor when I was about 21, 22 who corrected me. And I had said something along the lines of, for my simple mistakes as like a kid growing up and the wrongs that I had done, that I was like, I think I would be farther in life if God had forgiven me. And the fact that my life isn't farther along is proof that God hasn't. And she, my mentor, Rachel, said, are you open to the possibility that God has forgiven you, but you haven't forgiven yourself? And I had to take huge ownership of that. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, an all forgiving God, yes, he has. Therefore, I have to take radical ownership of all of, forgive my language, but the bullshit that I have bought into.
Mm.
This whole time, just passing that off, it's like, oh, God doesn't do it, this is on God's hands. It's like, no, you're just being a little bit of a coward, and that's the baseline of it. But it's like the reframe of like, I hope something's wrong with me because I can change me. But if the world is broken, that's really hard to do. But if I can simply be more courageous, oh, I can play with that, right?
Mm.
If there's something wrong with me entering the world and I've rejected myself first, rather than just saying, I'm going to ask and be okay with being rejected and give myself that 1% chance, a far more valiant, enriching life. And all those micro little adjustments that can radically change how I show up in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, thank you for
Uh,
having me.
yeah. How can people connect with you and hang more with you?
Yeah, Remmy Stourac everywhere, Instagram primarily, but also on Skool, Skool, Pro Spirit. You'll have that in the link there. But if anybody wants to join Pro Spirit, I've been sharing a brand new book, piece by piece, recalibrating emotional intelligence into a magic system, which completely takes away like all the judgmental factor and makes it more of a playground of intimacy and self-knowing. Um, if you just want to get involved in those conversations, you literally win points just by making comments. And if you get to level 5, then I will gift you one of my personally narrated audiobooks for free. And so just to get involved with other people, Nadine, other community builders who are all just like really obsessed with leaving the world better than they found each other. Yeah, that's a great place to connect and see more of you there.
Yeah, thanks, Remy. Remy's community is great, really.
Yeah,
Thank,
I'm on with
thank,
Nadine. Thank you so much for putting this together.
thank you. Any last words before we just say goodbye?
Just fumble forward valiantly. You are gonna mess it up, but we can act like it's all just experimenting. It's just a playground of self-discovery all along the way.
Mm, mm. Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate you tons.